I'd like to call to order the Board of Directors meeting for March 10th, 2026. Start off with, please, as a reminder, meetings of the Mechanicsburg Area School District Board of Directors are being recorded and live streamed for the purpose of transparency and increased public access. The live stream, along with the recordings from previously held meetings, can be found on the school board's YouTube channel. At this time, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we will have a moment of silent meditation. And if we can do the roll call, please.
Yes, starting with Mr. Bradley.
Here.
Mrs. Dang.
Here.
Mr. Frangel.
Here.
Mrs. Huff. Here. Mrs. Kearns.
Here.
Mr. Kickline.
Here.
Dr. Lebo. Miss Morgan.
Here.
Mrs. Strelo.
Here.
Thank you. Item 1.06 is endorsement of the agenda. Are there any changes for this evening's agenda?
There are no changes.
All right, thank you. Okay. And 1.07 is reading of the minutes of the regular board meeting from February 10th, 2026. Any comments, corrections, or issues with that? Hearing none, they'll stand as written. Thank you. At this point, we have come to the point in the meeting where it is open for public comment. This is public comment on items that are on the meeting agenda. There are two opportunities for public comment this evening. As a reminder, public comment is limited to residents and taxpayers of the school district. At this time, we've reached the first opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comments related to items that are listed on this evening's agenda. A second opportunity for public comment will occur at the end of the meeting. The second opportunity for public comment is reserved for comments on items or issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted upon. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable decorum. If you would like to address the board, please share your name and the municipality in which you reside. Seeing none, we'll move on. Item 3.01, Superintendent of Schools report, Dr. Bitts.
Thank you. A number of things to celebrate tonight, and we're going to start with our new principal of Broad Street. This, I think, is the first opportunity that the board will have to be able to engage with him in this position, but you've certainly engaged with him before. Mr. Paul Bigham, he is here to be able to share, along with some others from Broad Street, about some exciting things happening there in the library and with our STEM activities. So, Mr. Bigham.
Thank you, Dr. Bitts. First and foremost, thank you to the board for your continued support of not just Broad Street, but our programs as a whole, K through 12. Tonight is about connections, and there are some special connections being made at Broad Street in the area of STEM. We have Mrs. Heather Snyder here this evening, who's going to be doing the heavy lifting of the presentation here this evening, but talking about the impact of STEM and the incorporation and linkage of library. I know that you have heard from Mrs. Woodall with regarding the curriculum evolution that has occurred with regard to the primary STEM program and the growth of our students and the excitement of our students in the interaction of STEM at Broad Street is the reason why this was the chosen presentation to show the board our appreciation, because it is connected back to our mission. We are living our vision of a learning community that's inspired to explore, empowered to innovate, and the innovation of STEM is definitely alive and well. So without further ado, I'm going to call Mrs. Heather Snyder up, who's going to facilitate the conversation. We opted to have videos of our students as opposed to bringing them here tonight. Couldn't have predicted the weather, but not too many people want to come out on a nice night like this. They want to be out and about, but you're going to be well received with the information you received from Mrs. Snyder. So.
All right, so as Mr. Bigum stated, I know that we often have kiddos that come to present at the board meeting. If I could have brought all of my kids with me, I absolutely would have done that. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible, but you will see later on in the presentation that there are a lot of kids who did help with making this. So while I'm here as the physical face representing, really it's the kids who are going to share the valuable part of this presentation with you. So without any further ado, I'm Mrs. Snyder, I'm Heather. This is my first year in this position at Broad Street. Prior to this, I was a first grade teacher for many years for the district. In fact, there are quite a few familiar faces that are here tonight. But with excitement, I'm coming to share with you what we're doing in the library program and specifically how we're using STEM, not only at Broad Street, but also in our libraries across the district. So you're gonna see kiddos from our building, but you'll also see kiddos from other buildings because this is representative of the program as a whole. So if we could, where is it? Oh,
right in the middle there.
this is not my usual setup, so here we go. All right, so what is STEM? So you've probably heard STEM before. So STEM refers to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But the bigger question is, why is STEM important? Occasionally, we also have an A in there for STEAM, which represents art. We focus more on the STEM themes during our library time. But the reason why we want to incorporate this is because it's becoming increasingly needed for students to be successful in a global society. In the last couple of years, the percentages have increased dramatically for the jobs that are available, but the skill set is lacking. So we have all of these students that graduate, and eventually they might be able to go into the workforce. That's our hope for them, but the skill set isn't there. So in order to get those things to align, we need to have lots of opportunities for students to be able to engage in the critical thinking that happens during STEM time. So we can do that during our library special. So what we need to think about to get to where we're at now, we have to think about where we have come and then where we're headed. So in 2016 to 2017, we hired 2 new librarians, Heather Lutz and Sarah George, and they took on the task of revamping what the library program looked like at that point in time. They did the starting process of adding STEM into our program. They worked with Ann Reardon and they were able to get a grant written that started with the use of robots and coding into STEM. From there, we went into the addition of the STEEL standards, which were adapted from PA during the year of 2022, but this year currently, we are expected to have them in full force. When we're in the library, we use standards that come from ISTE, which is, I had to write this down to make sure I said it correct, International Society for Technology and Education. We also pull our standards from the American Association of School Librarians. But where we can interweave STEELs, we do. So we're usually like attacking all of those things in the lessons that we're doing. So where we're at right now, we had a stakeholder meeting and the decision was made that there was a lot of support to have more STEM in our programming offered through Mechanicsburg. And so we had the opportunity to look at what our timing currently had, and we discovered that there was an opening with an additional 3rd grade specials time that we could take to incorporate more STEM, but also the idea that in the coming years we're going to add the 4th and 5th grade actual STEM specials into the program. So that gives you a little idea of where we were at, where we currently are, where we're heading. So the big thing that I think is important to think about when you're thinking about STEM, whether it be at library or even in your classroom, it is really directly connected to our mission statement. The wheel that we use that's up there, and later on you're going to hear one of the kiddos talk about that wheel, that's what we use to sort of drive our discussions and our lessons in the library. And if you look at those different components that are around the outside of the wheel, you'll see that they really directly connect to our mission statement. So offering the students this opportunity to engage in STEM is really bringing to life what our district is about. All right, so looking at where our curriculum is at, from K through 3rd, those are the areas that I handle. The places where we have STEM interwoven are represented in the pink up on the screen. And you can see that out of our units, there are quite a few areas where we directly connect with the components of a STEM program. But we also still do the things that are essential for a library program as well. So students are coming and engaging with books, they're engaging with the text. We also try to offer a lot of books in the library that align with the content that we teach. So like some of the books that you guys are seeing that are passed around, give students the opportunity to then continue their independent learning outside of what we have done in the classroom. And these books, I can't keep them on the shelf. They are checked out as fast as they get returned. But even more so, kiddos come in and share with us about what they have done in their after school hours. I need this, or I need that, or I went home and found this, I used this. So that's what we want them to be able to do. We want them to take that learning, we want them to grow independently with it, but we also want them to transfer it to other environments besides what's just happening here at school. All right, so this is my favorite part. I could stand up here and tell you all the wonderful things about what we do in library, but the reality is the picture really talks more than what I can. So these are pictures of students across the district that are engaging in different STEM-related activities within our library program. While it plays, I'm just going to kind of talk through some of the things that you're seeing, but just the big thing, just look at the kids' faces, because that's going to be where you get the most bang for the buck. When you see their smile and see their engagement, that's the best part. Now, if I click on this, will it play? Okay. All right, so the kids started out with an activity that required them to work independently, but then we also go into activities where the students work together in groups. So some of the STEM activities that we have done have included building paper airplanes, but it's not as simple as just building a paper airplane. It comes with a set of guidelines. You have to have it go a certain distance, you have to have it achieve a certain type of flight pattern, and the kids go back and rebuild, because you'd be surprised how many kids have never built a paper airplane before coming to library. So that's a big part of what we do. We also do activities that involve arts and crafts. So this is that art part of STEM where they made marble mazes. And again, we give them the bare bones, but then they bring the creativity. And every one of them ends up with a goal that is met, but they all take different paths to get to that goal. They have different results. This was one of our group activities where they were challenged to make a paper chain with only one sheet of paper. And the goal was to try to see how long could they make the chain. And by the time they discovered how to do that, we had chains that went the length of the entire library from one sheet of 8x11 paper. So when they get that teamwork going and they start to talk through how they're doing the task, wonderful things can happen. We also incorporate robotics and coding. We start out with coding that's unplugged coding that doesn't use any kind of technology, just to give the kids an idea of what it means to code and talk robot language. And then they take that coding and then they use it to be able to do robots, and they do different challenges with the robots. We're getting ready to finish that unit right now. It's been a really fun unit. I got to learn with them, so that was really fun too. All right, so the next slide is also really powerful. The 3rd grade students at Broad Street wanted to have a big part in this presentation. As I said, I couldn't bring all of them. So we all worked together and talked through how we could share what they are doing. And then they picked different questions, and I just act as a facilitator to run the iPad and do some editing on the video. But the questions, they came up with those ideas. They also have the answers that they have shared, and the big message at the end, you'll see the groups come together. The big message is for you, so I won't give that surprise away. I will let them do the talking.
So we work together and like we have fun making things and like it challenges your brain to be like flexible and you have to be like a problem solver.
Yes, we had a bunch.
How did you work through those challenges?
Well, we worked through them by, there's a STEM wheel or engineer wheel that there is idea, plan, try, and create, and then there's an improve arrow. So if you don't get it right, you come off the arrow. But when we went to try it and create it, it was really tricky because there was a couple mistakes that we made, so we really had to start over, or not start over, but go off that improve arrow and try it again, and we kept doing that until we finally got the right idea of it. But it was challenging, and you really just have to kind of, like, even if your team doesn't have the same ideas, you still have to kind of do that, and you kind of just gotta say, well, I think that's an idea, maybe try theirs, maybe try yours, maybe just kind of go with trial and error, because when you do, sometimes that will work or sometimes it doesn't, and you just kind of go with it.
My favorite STEM project we've done is coding because I like trying to push it past the limits and seeing what else it can do other than what I'm supposed to do, and trying to code without any help. My favorite thing about coding is like letting the person work so it could pick up stuff and it could get to the finish line. So you could finish your final challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if that doesn't pull on your heartstrings, I don't know what will. Just seeing the kids in their glory, like really that's what we do. That's why we do this. It's for that, because all of those things that they were sharing, someday those things are going to correlate to life skills that are going to make them just good human beings. So that's why we do this in our programming. So without any other thing to say, I just want to say thank you to you guys for all of your current but also your continued support. We wouldn't be able to do what we do as specialists if we didn't have the support from the school board to try these things. And when we try them and they work, we just need to come back and say thank you for that opportunity.
I love the fact that they can actually cite back exactly what the purpose was. You know, they know what they are supposed to do, and they know the steps and, you know, the paths and the circle, and it's just amazing that they understand it that well.
And to see it in action, I mean, I would invite any of you any day, provided that we have approval for that, but I know several of you have come in and seen, but to see it in action, to seeing the kids do that live, but then also hearing them talk about what they are going home and doing outside of the school hours, that's just, you can't put words to that.
I can talk a little bit about that. My daughter, her granddaughter is in 2nd grade at Broad Street, and I got a very detailed lesson on how to make a paper airplane after school one day, and now I have a odd, but I have my own marble collection, which I've had to bring over to their house, and my old school wooden block marble track is not nearly as interesting as we had to buy this very advanced STEMmy kind of, I don't understand it. I'll stick with the paper airplanes. But yeah, excitement outside of school related to what my granddaughter is learning in school is just delightful. So yeah, it's working.
Good, good.
Another thing that I loved hearing Mackenzie say was that, it's not just about STEM, right? It's also about the life skills, because she said when something didn't work, we just kept trying, and that resilience piece is going to serve them so well later on in life.
And we even talk about anytime that we do a STEM challenge, we talk about how there will be frustrations and things may not go the way that you want. And, as a new person in this position, I try to model that, because there are moments where I'm trying to figure out in the moment what to do. And so I talk it through with the kids. Like, okay guys, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it, because I think that's important for the kids to see that.
Well, thank you for the work that you do, the curiosity that they have. As Mrs. Dang pointed out, the fact that they learn it's not going to be right the first time, that you keep trying, and even the part of the girl saying that she had to listen to other people's ideas, which at that age sometimes is a little tough, because you know what's right and you know how to do it. So I appreciate just the lighting the curiosity in there, and getting them to work and challenge or work together and try and improve things is a great job that you're doing. Thank you.
It's a fun job. I get to play and teach at the same time. It doesn't get better than that.
No, it doesn't.
Can I collect the books?
So we promoted connections. Okay, hopefully you saw those connections with both mission and vision. We are creating a generation of resilient, creative, innovative thinkers, collaborative team players that have to be ready for a rapidly changing global society. And as Heather mentioned in her intro, we're preparing students for jobs that don't exist yet. And that innate curiosity and that passion for learning. And I know from coming from a district office position with a former secondary background to a primary building seems like a weird traverse, but it's coming full circle. And being able to see the light and the passion for learning in students at such a young age, it's inspired by the efforts that are placed forth by our staff, by the district from a K through 12 system, the alignment of curriculum and resources, and that's really where you as a board need to be proud that we represent something here in Mechanicsburg that is above test scores. It's about the learning, it's about the community, it's about the needs of our future, and it's bright here in Mechanicsburg Area School District. So thank you again for everything that you do, and happy belated board appreciation, extended board appreciation, and again, our gratitude, and thank you, Heather, for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Well said by Mr. Bingham. I'll just reinforce briefly something that was sprinkled throughout, just the role that you as a board have played in that presentation, and even Heather standing here, because as some of you might remember, Mrs. Woodall and Mr. Underkoffler had led a group through a program evaluation of our elementary fine and applied arts program, and the recommendations of that was to add third grade additional library class. With that additional library class, we needed to hire an additional librarian, so that was in the budget last year, and Mrs. Snyder is that librarian that we were able to bring on board. So at a time when many districts are cutting librarians, we were able to add one. And in addition, that was the first step of several, which will, as Mrs. Snyder said, ultimately put us with STEM classes in both 4th and 5th grade as well. So just a preview to budget presentation for 2 weeks from now, we will be asking for the next part of that series of hirings, which is to hire an additional art teacher to again continue to add guaranteed and viable programming down at the kindergarten level. So directly a result of the support that you gave last year to be able to do that. So thank you.
And I'll go on record to say that the fact that Ms. Snyder gets more face time with more kids. She was in a 1st grade classroom last year with my son, and to know that more district students are getting to learn from her tells me I'm home run hire up there.
Yes, for sure, thank you. Very good. Well, we've got other things, great things happening, and next we want to be able to celebrate, as we do once a year, the work of Operation Wildcat. So I think I see Mrs. Collins back there, and I'm sure she'll be coming up to be able to share some updates, and I think we have a video to be able to share some more.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to come and do our annual presentation for Operation Wildcat. As most of you know, we are all volunteer, can I stress that, all volunteer organization, and our mission is simple, is to pool the resources in the community to help our students, families, and staff in need. And we are only successful thanks to the support of the school board, the school, the community, and those of you that are with OW, just stand up. This is just a smattering of our and without further ado, we'll cue up the video, and I apologize for the length, but we have a lot to say. Just for the past year. Any questions?
I think you need to step it up some.
Yeah.
Amazing. 20 years.
Yeah, it's 20 years started. 4 projects that back then. And thanks to Mr. Hood and his support in the very beginning.
Yeah, we always hear and we always tell people how amazing the Mechanicsburg community is, and it's people like you that volunteer and come up with these projects and welcome everybody into the community, creates that community spirit. So thank you for everything you do.
I moved here from Texas several years ago, and one of the first things we did when we moved into our new house was try to figure out what to do with the washer and dryer that was still in the house, because we had brought ours, and someone had told us, like, look up Operation Wildcat, and y'all were one of, like, my first impressions of the Mechanicsburg community. And just like I would just do, just scroll like all the different things on your website and click through all the different projects. And for a while, like anytime someone would ask me, like, how's Mechanicsburg? I'm like, let me tell you about this thing in this district we do. And I don't, like, at the time, I didn't know if, like, all districts do this, like, I don't know, this must be a Pennsylvania thing. And then I learned, like, oh no, that's just a Mechanicsburg thing. And, but I would, like, tell everyone, like, from Texas, like, let me tell you about this Operation Wildcat that, like, they show up and, like, it's so neighborly and, like, I mean, it's community and it's like, why don't more communities do this? And yeah, it was one of my first impressions of Mechanicsburg as a new resident, and just every time I see these slides, it's just like how cool that we get to live here and participate and show up for our neighbors and our community in this way, and also like receive. I mean, my son got cleats this past year from Cleat Bank. Thank you. And yeah, I just wanna say it's a really cool thing to go do like that. That is something that other communities, like a lot of churches or organizations, are trying to do it all by themselves. But here I was trying to like keep a tally of like all the different churches and organizations and individuals that come together and make this happen. It's like no one has to do it all by themselves because we're all coming together. And it's such a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all that you do, all that you continue to do, all that you continue to amaze us about what you, your organization, the volunteers. I know you say it's a lot of the community coming together, but there has to be a backbone behind that. There has to be an organization or a structure around it to make it work. And you do a phenomenal job. You and all the volunteers that work with you, an absolutely phenomenal job. And I'm sure Mrs. Morgan and I are sitting back saying it's been 20 years, and we remember back in the days of just the little things that operation was, and then it just continued to grow over the 18 or plus years that I've been around, and the 20 years that you've been doing what you do. So thank you, and thank you for just continuing to help and serve the community as the need continues to be there and continues to grow. So thank you.
Thank you.
And you never like retire. It's the same ladies here year after year.
Well, we have new faces.
I see new faces because I see old faces too.
They've
Which
been
is
around for a while. So Maureen, myself, and Anna Marie, and we are 3 of the originals, I think.
yeah,
So
it's amazing.
haven't got rid of us yet. Thank you. We
Totally
have,
amazing.
Thank you. A meeting.
We have our meeting to go to, so we don't anything else to do here. Continue on your business, but we do appreciate your support and your time today.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Great opportunity each year to celebrate the amazing work that they're doing. So thank you for the roles that you all play, either personally or as a family, or certainly support the business. It's great for our community. Last part of my my report is the general fund revenue presentation. So each year we break this up into two. So we talk about the revenue side of next year's budget here at the beginning of March, and then we come back to you at the second meeting in March to talk about the expense side of things. We added kind of a little bit of a third presentation last meeting as well, just to pull out one of the really important trends that we're seeing in the expense side. So we talked specifically about healthcare. So we talked a little bit about healthcare expenses last meeting. Now we're switching to revenue, and then we'll go back to the other expenses, including healthcare, when we get back together here in 2 weeks. But on the revenue side, we'll turn things over to Mr. Longwell, and he'll walk us through what we're looking at for the 26-27 school year.
Thank you. Grab a water here quickly.
Thank you for printing these out too.
Oh, yes, yes. Miss Jennifer deserves all
I
the
know,
credit for
she
that.
remembered last year.
So this evening, we'll walk through the revenue side of the budget. Dr. Betts and I will kind of tag team the presentation, but giving the board an update on where we are in terms of the general fund and our projected revenue for next school year. All right. So a little bit of an agenda here for you this evening. We always like to talk about the revenue composition of the budget. So when you think about the revenue side of the budget, I think about, well, what are our local sources of revenue? What are our state sources of revenue? And what are our federal sources of revenue? And what percentage of the whole revenue does each of those components make up? And so we'll talk a little bit about that this evening, some of the trends that we're seeing. We'll also talk with you in terms of local revenue, the historical real estate tax data. We'll look at our Act 1 index. We will talk about the real estate tax composition and what makes up our district when you think about local revenues. Enrollment data. Enrollment's an interesting one because we'll probably talk about it in both revenue and expense. In one breath, I think you can look at, well, we are a growing district, right? So we're increasing assessed value, but not to give away the real estate composition. We're a largely residential community, and so while we get assessed value growth in that regard, those new homes come with students, and so the students then also impact the expense side of the budget. And we're happy to have them, but in the next breath, it also indicates, it takes us to conversations around, well, maybe we need additional teachers for class sizes, or the buildings need to be larger to accommodate our growing enrollment. So we'll talk a little bit about enrollment and how that impacts obviously both sides of things. And then we'll look a little bit more in detail about state revenue and federal revenue. In terms of our revenue budget, you can see for 25-26, starting at the 50,000 foot view, about $106 million, $107 million in terms of total revenue for 2025-26. So that really becomes our base as we look forward to 26-27. And that base, we say, okay, based on current trends that we're seeing when we look back to 24-25, or we look at current trends in 25-26, how does that base need to be adjusted for 26-27? And in some regard, we might have positive budget variances where we're saying earned income taxes are growing, so the budget needs to be updated in that regard. Or there might be other revenue assumptions where we're saying the interest rate environment is changing and decreasing a little bit, and so we might need to kind of curtail some of our expectations around interest revenue. So the base is really 25-26 because that's the current enacted budget, but then what adjustments are we making within that for local, state, and federal revenues? And so at a very quick glance or quick summary, you can see how we're adjusting that base. Local revenue, we're seeing $2.2 million in increases. State revenue at $3.4 million, and then federal revenue about $45,000. And so that brings our total projected revenue for 26-27 to $112,590,797. And we will talk about each of those three buckets as we go in through the presentation to say, well, what makes up the local changes, what makes up the state changes, and then what makes up the federal changes. One thing we always like to look at with our board too is the composition, and so you see the pie chart on the bottom. That's probably a familiar one in our presentation. For our more veteran board directors, you'll notice probably a little bit of a shift in a good way. The local revenue used to be more like 74, 75%, but through the last 2 or 3 years, you've seen more state funding being infused. It's a reaction in a little way to the fair funding lawsuit in 2023. The state's trying to push more money through in an equitable way to help equalize things. And so we've seen a little bit of a shift in that regard to say their state funding pie has gotten to 28%, where maybe it was more like 24, 25%. The local's at 71%, and federal's still kind of hanging in there at 1%. Pretty steady.
I was going to say that to you, Greg. I'm like,
yeah.
The numbers are shifting.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it's always pegged right there at 1%. Maybe with the exception of the pandemic, where we did get some additional dollars, for federal, that would maybe be the one exception. Probably the only other thing I like to point out there too is the 1% sliver. That 1% sliver for federal comes with more compliance requirements, as our board knows, than the whole rest of the 99% of the pie. And so I really very much appreciate Mrs. Ely's effort, Mrs. Woodall's effort. There's a lot that goes into those compliance requirements and making sure that we are following through with reporting, staffing. There's a number of compliance things there. So in terms of local revenues, the adjustments, so what makes up that $2.2 million, right? So that's the first of the three buckets. So the $2.2 million, you can see some of the specific changes there that we wanted to discuss this evening. growth in assessed value, real estate taxes. And so growth in assessed value is truly you have new properties coming onto the tax rolls because maybe new developments are being built out. You have maybe people adding on to their homes in additions in the form of additions, and that generates additional tax revenue. The assessed value growth from a year-to-year perspective generally grows about at 1 or 2% a year, and so it's something we monitor with reports from the county, with myself, Mrs. Ely, Dr. Bitts, to just say during the course of the year, how much assessed value are we adding to the school district's tax rolls, because it does translate ultimately to tax revenue. And so if you look at the 596,000, that's about 1% in terms of our real estate taxes collected in the year. Real estate tax increase, so we always break the tax increase into two components as we talk with the board. One component is the financing plan, and so as we'll talk a little bit later here in the presentation, we started setting aside some of our tax increase for the financing plan in 2018-19, and every year we've been setting aside about 1% or 1.5% through the years to ultimately help fund construction. And so back to the growing enrollment caused us to need to add staff, but also to look at our buildings, because even as we were starting the construction process back in 2015 and 16 and looking at feasibility studies, the buildings were really reaching capacity even then. And in a few slides you'll see about enrollment, why it was very timely, because, and kudos to our board and administration, because those construction projects were just in time to also absorb all of those students that we were going to soon add from 2016 and on. But the financing plan is something that we have set aside, and it is the last of the tax increases that are set aside for that way. So this is the last of that. Really the other component of the tax increase is the operating tax increase, and we'll come back to the board here later this month with a recommendation around that component of the real estate taxes. Earned income tax is a personal income tax. It's a wage-based tax, and you can see based on wage growth in our region in Cumberland County and Mechanicsburg, we're expecting around a 3% trend, and that's based on monthly reporting that we get from the Cumberland County Tax Bureau. They do a very nice job of helping keep us in tune with what's happening on a month-over-month basis in terms of those revenues. That would generate about $524,000. Interest income, we talked a little bit about that.
Can we pop back to that other one? I think it's important to note that that 3% increase that we're budgeting is lower than is typical. Earned income tax so far this year hasn't been trending to where it typically does. It's fallen behind where we would expect. It is seemingly catching up a little bit based on the last month that we received. But up until this last month, it was definitely lagging behind the norm and what was budgeted for this year. So we were pretty conservative in what we budgeted here for earned income tax. Hopefully we finish catching the rest of the way up. We've got a few more months this year to go, and the signs are pointing towards, hopefully, for whatever the blip was, it was trending low.
I'm really glad Dr. Bitts mentioned that, and I would kind of build on that a little further to say earned income tax is one of the more sensitive estimates on the revenue side of the budget. Real estate taxes, you get your assessed value. We know generally how much we collect every year. It's very stable. It's over like 98%, 99%, and it becomes, I don't want to say easier, but it's a little easier to project. Where earned income tax really is a function of the economy. And so while we monitor it month over month, we look at it year over year. I mean, we have seen some years where it's grown 5 or 10%, but as Dr. Bitts said, we are seeing a slowing. And as we look into the future, it's a little bit of reading the tea leaves, because we're projecting out what we think 25-26 is going to look like. We're here in the month of February, March. I think we have a better sense of that, but there's still a little bit more of the year to go. So how do we think we're going to finish this year? And then how do we project forward to what we think maybe is going to happen in the next year? And so that trending that Dr. Bitts referred to, I think, is a really important aspect of earned income taxes, especially because it is one of our most sensitive areas in the revenue side of things. So when we talk about the economy, interest revenue is another one, right? You know, so you're kind of looking to see, well, what happens with interest rates, because we do have cash balances and cash reserves. We're actively managing what cash flow looks like in terms of having it in deposit accounts or investing in CDs. Our business office does a really nice job in that regard of trying to maximize interest earnings. But the reality is that the interest rates are starting to come down a little bit. And I think we see that even locally when you go into your local bank. And so for us, we're saying we need to maybe just curtail that, bring that back down a little bit in terms of our expectations around revenue for interest. And that's a $100,000 reduction. And then there's some other revenue adjustments at $378,000. I know that's a larger number, but there's a whole variety of things that kind of go into that. And as we get to the end of the month meeting, when we give you your budget binders, you'll certainly be able to see all that. And if there's questions, we can certainly talk through those at that point. So when you look at average local revenue per ADM, ADM would be our average daily memberships or enrollment. This is a way that I think you can kind of benchmark to say, back to the pie chart, we're about 71% of local revenue. So when you look at that total local revenue per our student enrollment, how do we stack up against the average in the IU? Or how do we stack up against the average in the state? And there you can see in terms of local revenue, we are more heavily weighted, about 71%. We're 5th in the IU, and we're 138th out of 500 in the state. A couple things I think you could say about that. I think one for me is the fair funding lawsuit in 2023. There's some things you can unpack here to say that 71%, while it was helpful to have some of those last several years of infusion of additional cash, inadequacy, and Ready to Learn block grant, but the story's not done there yet. I think we continue to advocate to say they're helping to establish more equity, but not done yet, and we need to see more dollars to help. And the reason I would suggest that is if you look at our relative placement in the state to say local revenue per ADM, and we'll look later at state revenue per ADM, the aid ratios, the relative wealth of the school district, so how much local revenue do we generate is based on how much commercial properties do you have, how much residential properties do you have, your earned income taxes. The idea of funding equity is that the state comes in to help try to equalize the landscape, because some schools might be very, very heavily commercial, or they might generate a lot of money in earned income taxes. But then the state should be and is trying to endeavor to say, well, how does state funding help balance out the picture so that schools are being fairly funded per pupil across the entire state? I recognize that's a pretty significant challenge, especially when you think about how schools have been funded in the last 30 or 40 years, and they are taking steps to fix it. But all that said, if you look at the relative wealth of schools at a state level, and you look at our aid ratios like the market value personal income ratio, the schools we're near around relative wealth are not the same schools we're near when you look at our ranking in state funding in terms of state funding per pupil. And what that tells me is that we are probably still disadvantaged by the idea of fair funding because we're a rapidly growing district. And then how have we changed over the years where some of the schools in aid ratio where we might be near, they're a wealthier district, but we're basically getting the same amount of state revenue per pupil as them, if that makes sense. And so those are some benchmarks that we kind of look at is the relative wealth of schools, the ranking in the state, but then how does that compare and correlate to the relative state funding per pupil, because there should be some correlation on some level.
I think when you see the rankings for state revenue in another several slides, it'll make it make more sense.
Sure. A little bit of historical data on real estate tax rates. And so when you look down the left-hand side, you can see our fiscal years that we're kind of displaying here for the board. 2018-19 was the beginning of our financing plan. And so then when you work left to right, millage is a function of taxes. It's how we develop what revenues we're going to be receiving. It's the tax rate that's in effect. It's how the tax bills are prepared. Ultimately, though, we like to also look at not just millage, but kind of put it in the form of a percentage tax increase because it's easier to understand, right? So when you say to your neighbor at the grocery store, the mills increased from 13.3 to 13.7, you'll probably get a funny look, versus in 2018-19, our taxes went up 2.4%. I think that's easier to relate to. So we often look at taxes in relation to percentage as well. You can see the construction increases there from 1 to 1.5% have varied through the years. And then, as we said, 2026, 27 is the last year of our financing plan, phasing that in. The other component then of our tax increase has been, how do we support operations? And so you can see there generally what we've been in terms of operating tax increases. And then when you add the total together, that does give ultimately you our total tax increase percentage. So you can see we varied in the 2s and 3s there, most recently at 4.5%. And then the last thing I would draw your attention to is the last column, which is ultimately our adjusted Act 1 index. And so that is kind of the ceiling, if you will, to say how much can we raise taxes by. And normally, and through all of these years, certainly displayed, we would have adopted in those fall timeframes of each of those school years the resolution to stay within the Act 1 index. And so that's another piece of perspective as you kind of look at the chart here.
So why do you think the Act 1 percentage for next year, 4.3, why is that less than it's been for a while?
Yeah, that's good question. So the Act 1 index, and I just have to think about the acronyms, is a function of the ECI, which is the Employment Cost Index, and the SAW, SAWW, which is the State Average Weekly Wage, I believe, I think. Both of those are ultimately elements that help determine what the Act 1 index is. So I would say probably the more succinct answer to your question is, depending on what's happening in the wages of the state also indicates like what's going to happen with the Act 1 tax increase. And so you could probably see where it was higher through some of those years. That probably was where you were seeing wages grow more, not just at a regional level, but at a state level. And we could see that in our earned income taxes. Some of those years where it was reaching 4.8, 6.5, 5%, those were some of our biggest year-over-year increases in earned income taxes. And so when wages are a factor of the Act 1 index, then it just naturally kind of ebbs and flows with what's happening with the labor market. And so I think we're seeing a little bit of a slowing. And you can see even as the IFO, it's the state's independent fiscal office, they're projecting a little bit of a continued decline, I'll say. Not sharp, but I would say my feeling on that 4.3% for 26-27, that might look more like 4% adjusted for 27-28 because of what's happening in the labor market and what some of the trends are.
So that means that we can't raise taxes as high as we would want, right?
Yes, because it is our ceiling.
So that means we can only pull less money from the community for the taxes, right?
Mm-hmm. It is our ceiling.
So
sorry, go ahead.
That means we'll have less and less money for the budget because we're not going to get more and more money from the state or the federal government.
So there's kind of also an interesting dichotomy there in the last year or two where there's the index, you can apply for exceptions, but then because of the adequacy and ready to learn, in accepting that money, you had to affirm that you wouldn't seek exceptions. And so that's a little bit of the challenge of you are limited by your index. In a typical year, you could maybe seek exceptions for things like special ed costs, right? Or retirement, increasing retirement. But ultimately, it's kind of a catch-22 because we want to accept additional money. It's very helpful to us, but then it also limits you on what you can do around exceptions.
Right or wrong, that cap is part of the reason why you hear folks talk about the tax increase, that when we choose not to go to the index, you're leaving money on the table that you'll never have the opportunity to recoup because you can't. If you choose to go less one year, you can't make up that on an increase the next year because you're still capped at a certain percent. So obviously that has varied over the years. There's years that we've gone to the cap and other years where we've been well short of it. So it's always a balancing act. But to your point, yeah, we're capped at how much local revenue we can raise, but we're also really limited control over what we get from the state and federal government too.
That's great. This is a little bit of a graphical representation of what we were just talking about. So in 26-27 budget year, the Act 1 adjusted index is 4.3. The base index is 3.5%. Ultimately, the total increase, those two components of operating and financing, will bring a recommendation back to the board as we finalize the expenditure side of the budget. And we'll do that later at the end of this month. But we always know going into it, the because of the financing plan, we had already kind of said that 1% was part of that plan. And so we programmed that in to share with the board as part of the revenue presentation, what that translates to. You can see the adjusted Act 1 index, kind of how it had been back in 1819, kind of in the mid-twos there, in the mid-twos. And then you can see through 23, 24, 24, 25, heading into 25, 26, it was getting up into the 4s, 5s, and even above 6 there one year. Pre-2018-19, so if you go back to the early years of Governor Wolf or all the way back to Governor Corbett, it was in that 2s-ish, I'll say up to 3 around then too. And so that 6.5 is certainly a high point in my mind in the last probably 15 or more years, so since Act 1 was instituted. So again, we talk a little bit about, I think this is where a slide, you can look and say, well, real estate taxes, it's the single largest line item in our budget. It's about half by itself. It's over $50 million of our budget in terms of revenue. So what makes up our real estate taxes? Who are the taxpayers, if you will? And 88% of our tax base is in fact residential. 4% is land, 5% is commercial, 2% is tax exempt, and 1% is other. So things like utilities would probably fall into the other, water companies, electric companies, railroads, things like that. The 88% though, I think a couple pieces to narrate the story, I think, around that. One is that growing enrollment part, right? So it's good when we grow as a district, but it largely is residential and often comes with, the increasing enrollment. And so while it helps us on the revenue side of the picture, we often have some expenses too to pick up because of our growing enrollment. The other thing I think that I wanted to point to here, and we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation in terms of our state revenue per pupil, is this is a good example where this pie chart looks very different across the 500 school districts. And so we're a very heavily weighted 88% residential. There's some schools where they might have a much larger slice of commercial and industrial, and those commercial and industrial properties aren't contributing students to the school district, but they're contributing revenue in the form of local real estate taxes. And so that conceptually for me in a 30-second elevator speech is how you talk about state funding equity, because it shouldn't just be about, we were fortunate enough to have 18 car dealerships versus the next school over might have all of the residences. The state should be kind of coming in to try to help equalize that, to say, how do we equitably fund all 500 schools, knowing that some have stronger local real estate taxes, some have stronger local earned income taxes, but how does the state overlay their formulas to help bring equity to that landscape?
Greg, just out of curiosity, do you have any idea that school district that has all those car dealerships, what their commercial percentage is?
I will have to look into that and get a snapshot. I don't know off the top of my head, but it is a good question. But there is, to your point, even in our IU or in South Central Pennsylvania, it can look very, very different from one district to the next.
Well, my point being, yeah, the school district next door is completely different than what we are. We don't have the Carlisle Pike.
Yeah. Making a note about the question. Good. So enrollment, we wanted to spend a moment here, and I know our board has seen this slide before through the years, but you can see in 2015-16, around 3,800 students, 3,850 probably. And then in 25-26, our ADMs are up over 4,700, probably approaching 4,800. So for perspective's sake, that's almost 1,000 students that we added in that 10 or 11 year period of time. And I think to help, kind of ground that with some additional context, there's 5 school districts in our IU that are individually about 1,000 kids or less. And so in that 10 or 11 year period of time, that would be like us absorbing a Newport school district into Mechanicsburg in terms of total enrollment, or like a Halifax school district. Like I said, there's about 5 individually right around that 1,000 enrollment mark. So that has caused us over the years to think about, well, our facilities need to be bigger to accommodate class sizes and growing enrollment, because the buildings were already at capacity even when we started construction, the feasibility study in 15-16, but also like what does that mean for our teachers and our need for additional staff, because we do have a view of philosophy on our class sizes, and 1,000 additional kids means we need more staff in the form of teachers or IAs or administrators to support a larger district. So enrollment data is something that we do look at because it's the residences that are growing, it adds to our tax base, but then on the other side of the equation and the expense, how does it impact the school district in terms of the budget? But in terms of state revenue adjustments, so this is the second of the 3 buckets. The first was local revenue, and now we'll talk a little bit about state revenue. So what was the increases for that $3,400,000 approximately? And when we step down through, you'll see we've updated the budget to reflect the governor's proposal. A couple things I think to say there. There's always a little bit of reading the tea leaves when it comes to the governor's budget proposal, because that comes out in about February timeframe, right? But administratively, and then with all of the P groups, whether that's PASA with the superintendents or PASBO with the business officials, we're trying to get information about, well, how likely is it that the governor is going to get everything he or she asked for, or how likely is it that maybe it's something less? And so it's a little bit of this, well, where do we want to land as a district? I think in this current year, based on the information we're receiving, I'm receiving, we're in different conversations with the P groups and our colleagues, it does seem like a very stronger likelihood that we will get what the governor has proposed. And so that is what we've included in our budget in terms of basic education funding, special education funding, the Ready to Learn adequacy supplement. Those 3 are probably the biggest revenue streams in terms of the governor's proposal, and we'll talk about some of the other line items here in a few minutes, but you'll notice that the basic education funding is only an increase of about $145,000. So he's proposing $50 million goes into the basic education funding formula, which is a pretty small number all in all. Like even in kind of the scarce years back with Governor Corbett, it was maybe 100 million that was going into that line item. So 50 million is a pretty small number all in all. Special ed, likewise, is about 50 million flowing into that formula, and that results in about $69,000 increase for us, where he has directed Governor Shapiro more money is into the Ready to Learn adequacy supplement. The adequacy supplement, frankly, it helps with the funding equity discussion, and you can see it's a very large number there for us. So it helps us because we are disadvantaged in the equity discussion because of where we are in terms of state funding per pupil. So when they talk about adding additional dollars in response to the Commonwealth Court ruling, but also in terms of generating more equity, we do fare pretty well in that regard. One of the challenges I think at a legislative level is depending on which money, which of those 3 buckets they flow money through, the results for the local school districts can be very different. So if you're a legislator from a certain part of the state, maybe you're saying, hey, we want more money in basic education funding because that benefits our local schools more than saying putting all that money through the adequacy supplement. And that's where I think you start to see these more challenging budget discussions in recent years, because we've added these additional funding streams where it's not just, well, how much goes through basic education funding? Now it's, well, how much goes through basic education funding and how much goes through the adequacy funding? Because between those 2, it could result in different outputs, different totals in terms of state funding increases. I will say for us, generally, we fare pretty well in either of the conversations because in the I'll say 2016 or so, the state moved away from their old hold harmless. So pre-2016, basic education funding was largely you got what you got last year plus like 2 or 3%, right? And everyone was hold harmless. So regardless of your enrollment increasing or decreasing, all 500 schools generally kind of got this one size fits all approach. The state then realized, well, we do need to maybe do something a little more around, growing districts, shrinking districts, like how do we respond more to the local pressures that are happening or the reality of what's happening locally. And so a Basic Education Funding Commission had created a new formula. They didn't go back though and redistribute all the old money. They kind of like froze it, hold harmless, and then said any new money flows through the formula. So I share that to say you kind of have hold harmless, then you've got from 2016 and on, they're putting more money through the formula. The formula is more responsive to things like growing enrollment, where we do fare pretty well. So that's usually why additional dollars through BEF would help us, probably even maybe disproportionately to some others. But adequacy really is in direct response, in my opinion, to the Commonwealth Court ruling, and so we fare well in that regard too. But again, I just thought I would take a moment and share a little bit of additional context why I think some of the state budgets have drug on, because of how they direct these monies can result in different results for districts across the state.
So why are we 400,000 less in the charter school reimbursement?
Yeah.
I'll take that one.
Yeah. Dr. Vincent.
You skipped over that one.
This was a little bit of a gain with the charter schools. So in the budget for 25-26, one of the efforts, because they didn't pass the charter school cap, so they had said that there would be a rate cap so that all 500 school districts would pay the same rate. That didn't go through, but instead they said that they would provide a reimbursement to school districts. So the reimbursement we got through that negotiated compromise was $400,000. So now going into next year's budget, what instead, and actually for part of this year's as well, they have converted that from a reimbursement to now they've moved it over onto the expense side of the budget. So now instead they've changed the formula to deduct some things that previously we had to include in our calculation for how much money we would pay the charter schools. Ultimately, we used to get a reimbursement for 400,000. This year we're saving on the expense side about 300,000 through the new formula. So they moved the approach, and it's costing us another $100,000 a year. But I don't disagree with any of the changes they made to the formula. I think they were good changes, but ultimately it's still not providing any substantive relief.
And I think what's interesting, and you see post the budget adoption, there was a little bit of what was happening in charter schools. And so if you picture a triangle, the state was giving schools money in the form of reimbursement, but then in the 25-26 budget, kind of took that money away, made the schools whole, or kind of not entirely whole, by saying, well, we'll adjust the expense tuition calculation, which actually then took some money away from the charter schools. And so, the school districts, we hope to draw even. In this case, it's about a net 100,000 negative. But ultimately, I think to Dr. Bitz's point, that conversation should continue. We support changing the formula. I think that's another one where there's like, hey, that was step one. Is there more opportunities to continue to address the cyber charter formulas in terms of how they're funded? Because I think it's about fair funding. How do we fairly fund, I think, is the question, cyber charter schools.
So my question is, do you see that conversation coming up ever again about how much we can limit the charter schools charging?
I thought we were pretty darn close last time, and it still didn't happen. I guess the simple answer is I'm not sure that we're ever going to get to a flat rate. I think there's still some more negotiating, but I think most of the people that are willing to negotiate want to tie it to increased school choice in a broader sense beyond just cyber charter. So until it gets wrapped up in that effort, I don't think there's going to be agreement. But we'll see.
And I think Dr. Bitz aptly mentioned the flat funding, or the flat rate, right? So I think for our board, and we talked a little bit about this, that the 500 districts have 500 regular education rates that we pay to the same charter schools to educate all of our kids. We also have 500 special education rates to pay to the same charter schools to educate our kids. So Cumberland Valley might pay a different rate for special ed or regular ed, they do, to go to a certain cyber charter school. We would pay a different rate to go to the same cyber charter school to educate the same kids, same program. And so that's one of the advocacy points is, what does fair funding look like? Shouldn't there be a rate instead of 500 regular ed rates and 500 special ed rates? I think the other piece too, from an advocacy perspective, that I like to point out is our regular ed rate's probably around 15,000, give or take, with the new rates that were adjusted, as Dr. Bitz shared. Special ed rates are probably around 30,000 now, give or take. So one of the challenges in my mind is, for every special needs student that's in cyber charter, we're paying an extra $15,000. Are the cyber charters paying $15,000 of more costs on behalf of every one of Mechanicsburg special needs students? And I think there's some studies out there that show that's not entirely the case or happening, that the special education tuition they're generating is not necessarily covering just special needs costs associated with separate charter schools. And so that's a point of advocacy that you'll see in the newspaper or you'll hear being talked about. So
the other number I'll draw your attention to is that special education funding number, the increase in funding that we're receiving from the state of $69,000 more. I can tell you that in 2 weeks when we talk about the expenses on the special education side, the expense increase is a lot more than $70,000. So that continues to be a minute fraction of the expenses that we actually have for special education.
And that's a great point, because that's kind of another advocacy point that we make with our local legislators or in conversations about the budget is, if you look at our special education costs, we need and want to provide services, right? And that cost is going up disproportionately to how much revenue we're getting from the state. So the state is not necessarily keeping up with their proportional, and certainly we'll talk about that at the end of the month when we look at some comparisons there. So. Excuse me, the transportation subsidy, the Social Security reimbursement, retirement reimbursement, all of those are kind of reimbursement basis, so they're expenses that we have in the budget. So transportation, for our transportation costs, we get back a certain percentage for in the form of revenue or reimbursement. Social Security and retirement, I like to point out, as much as we like to see increasing revenues like that, especially $325,000 for retirement, it's a 50% reimbursement. So what it really means is on the expense side, there's $650,000 of expense increases. And so I always like to see increasing revenues, but kind of the asterisk there is that for some of those revenues, there are maybe disproportionate increases in expenses on the expense side of the budget. So we always like to kind of point that out for perspective. So I started to introduce this on the local revenue, where we were in terms of ranking in the IU, local revenue per ADM, or a local revenue at a state level per ADM. And I think this is another good place, as Dr. Betts shared earlier, this might help to bring some more context to that point. And so when you look at Mechanicsburg, when you think about state revenue per ADM, you can see we're at $4,849 per student. Where that puts us in the IU is 20 out of 24. Where it puts us in the state is 472 out of 500. And so for some context, if you think about the 500 districts and the relative ranking, right, in terms of state revenue per ADM, we're at 472. And when you look at the schools that are around us with the market value aid ratio, the relative wealth of the school, those aren't the same schools. When you look at the market value aid ratio and say, well, where are we in the state? We're not 472, we're more like, I think 341 or something, right? And so the schools in market value aid ratio relative wealth of the district aren't the same corresponding schools that we're near when you're kind of stacking it up and saying how much revenue do we get on a state level per student.
My summary of this and the previous one is that the system is designed for the Mechanicsburg Area School District to be funded on the backs of our local customers. That is how the system is currently designed. We're 472nd out of 500 in the state revenue. The system is designed for our local taxpayers to be paying the bill.
And I think that ties directly, and I think Dr. Betts makes a very good point, that ties directly to like our advocacy for the Commonwealth Court of Action in 2023. Some of the increases they've done since then have helped, but they were just some of the initial steps that probably need to happen because we should be higher than 472.
How is that calculated? Is that calculated on affluence?
The aid ratios, you mean? Yeah, they look at, so market value, there's some different aid ratios, but the market value personal income aid ratio looks at your assessed values, your real estate taxes, which if you think about the pie chart with how the district is funded, 88% residential, you might have, in terms of market value real estate taxes, other schools that are more heavily weighted with commercial or industrial, and so they're getting the benefit of those extra tax dollars at a local level. The personal income ratio is a function also of earned income taxes and wages. And so again, if you think about the relative wealth of a school, some of it is derived off of your earned income taxes that you're generating from the wage base that's in your community. And so that can look very different in RIU among the 24 districts. As you think about Dauphin County, Perry County, Cumberland County, in terms of the residential side of things, it could look very different across the state. And so the relative wealth of the district, when we kind of talk about that and unpack that a little bit, it really is, the aid ratios help to kind of show a continuum of how schools are funded locally in terms of their real estate taxes, their earned income taxes. And maybe an important distinction too is it's not just your tax rate, right? Because your tax rate you can increase taxes and it can affect obviously your real estate revenue, but how you're comprised also is a big factor in how much real estate revenue you have. Because if you have much more commercial, much more industrial, you're getting some pretty big dollars without necessarily raising your tax rate, but you're getting some pretty big dollars because of how your district is, the makeup of it in terms of real estate taxes. So that's the relative wealth of school district.
Well, plus I moved up 13 points from last time.
Yeah, so I think we probably, as time will go, hopefully we'll continue to climb the chart. I think for me, when you look at the aid ratios, being in the 300s, the schools, I don't want to call out anyone in particular, but the schools we're near in the 300s aren't the same schools that we're near at 472 in terms of the relative wealth of the schools. And so it's not about, for me, it's not about comparing districts right, wrong, or different. It's more just about the landscape to say, I think the data signals to us when you look at state revenue per pupil and then our aid ratio relative wealth of a district, that there's still more work to be done around equity of funding. And I think there's other districts too that have that same argument, frankly, not only in RIU, but at the state level. So. In terms of federal revenue adjustments, this is the kind of the third of the three buckets. It's the 1% of the pie. So generally we don't see a very large increase in that regard. You can see we have some additional dollars we're expecting in Title I. That's kind of based on what we currently receive. Title II, Title III, and Title IV. I'll take you back to the fall where there was some uncertainty around the title grants, and we talked about that as part of our budget trends presentation. I think basically where things stand now, we're feeling comfortable with budgeting what we currently receive for those title grants in 1, 2, 3, and 4.
While not a lot of money, we're thankful that the federal legislature has continued to fund all 4 title grants.
And then lastly, federal revenue per ADM, 22 out of 24 in the IU, and 404 out of 500 in the state.
Are you sure you're doing the math right? Because these aren't very good numbers.
Yeah. I wish they were different. Or I wish I had a better news report. But I think for us, it helps to signal, like, how do we tell our story, not just in terms of how we construct our 26-27 budget, but how we tell our story to advocate with our local legislators, or advocate about what state funding should look like, or what we feel it should look like in terms of equity.
We need some t-shirts.
In terms of next steps, so as we move, coming full circle to as we open up the presentation, Dr. Betts had shared the 2-part process that we have normally employed through the years. So we have looked at revenue here this evening. We plan to return on March 24th and talk with the board about expenditures, also provide the budget summary, and then make some recommendations around the final tax increase. Ultimately, then that leads us to a 2-part approval of the budget, which is a compliance piece. It's what we're required to do as school districts. You have to adopt it, at least initially, the proposed final, and then leave 30 days between the 2 budgets, the initial approval and final approval, and then we'll return June 9th for final adoption of the 26-27 general fund budget. At that same time, we'll set in place our homestead farmstead exclusion, which is some of the state monies that we get to help offset those residential properties that are approved as either homestead, farmstead, or both. Thank you. I appreciate you bearing with me. It's a tough comparison to follow the, Broad Street Elementary and then to follow OW. And then on a nice evening here, we'll talk about the budget. But thank you for hanging in there. So.
You saw how much money they raised, right?
Oh, yeah. They're doing a very good job. Very good job. Thank you.
Great job by Mr. Longwell and Mrs. Ely and the team to put together the entirety of the budget, but especially on the revenue side, Mr. Longwell talked a lot about the conversations that especially those two have with so many other folks in the region and state, to be able to, as he said, read the tea leaves and continue to trend. The spreadsheets they have are amazing, let me tell you, to be able to trend by day, by month, to be able to make sure that we're locking these numbers in conservatively, but the best we can to get the best budget that we can put together. On the expense side, there's even more folks that speak into that, but on the revenue, that's a lot of the work of Mr. Longwell and Mrs. Ely, so nice job.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate Dr. Bitts being a numbers background. It's funny how we can talk about a spreadsheet and 6 months later he'll get the number right without a reminder. And so we have a great team and appreciate the process that we follow. So.
Good old wizards.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That is the end of my report.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Longwell. All right, at this point, we'll move on to item 3.02, the Capital Area Intermediate Unit. Mrs. Straley.
Yes, I am not officially a part of that yet.
Yet.
But in the previous board meeting on February 26th, the board was able to do a presentation reviewing mid-year review of the CAIU strategic plan. And so I got briefed on, what some of the focus areas were for that, which are artificial intelligence, comprehensive professional learning, digital accessibility, feedback recruitment, and safety and cybersecurity.
Any questions? All right, thank you for your report. At this point, we'll move on to 3.03, the Capital Perry Area Career and Technical Center. Mr. Kicklin.
All right, well, the JOC met on February 23rd. It is definitive, there will be no middle school camp this summer because of construction, so a lot of the conversation did revolve around construction. Some good news is that they are doing some final testing here. I think the final test will be in May on the water supply around the area because of that fuel spill that they had, and so that's looking good so far. I think they've had 2 tests so far, so one final test that should be behind us. Couple of notes of the construction is mostly that we need to have a better oversight of the construction. They have a contract out, I think, with, I don't know if I wrote that one particularly down, but with a different organization to hopefully get that construction finished here. We want to get that done by the fall, obviously, we want to go in some new students and more students. Another item to mention is we are going to be putting in a diesel backup generator. There's a couple of various reasons behind that. But we'll have a redundant system, so we won't have to worry too much about the leakage. There is also talk about moving East Pennsboro to I think the morning session.
Yes.
That will help balance out the numbers and hopefully add some more capacity. And then obviously when the addition comes online, that should help as well. A lot of great things happening. One shout out is one of the advertising design students did have their infographic published by the Department of Natural Resources. And so you're seeing a lot of these students that are already in co-ops, 103 students in co-ops, earning prevailing wages, doing really well. So that's always really encouraging to hear. They will be having a community day on April 25th from 9 to 2 o'clock, and they will be selling wares to the public. So please consider going to that. And lastly, one item that was mentioned is the county did just update their radio specifications for emergency personnel. So one of the gentlemen did bring up that we might want to look at getting P25 radios for the CTC this so we can tap in if there is an emergency, they can contact us and vice versa. So probably something a lot of districts would do. We have a meeting scheduled for March 23rd. That's in my report.
Did you get to partake in any of the food?
You know, with the snow days, first of all, when I volunteered, I didn't know about that. I just want to be clear. But it's a great perk. But because of the snow days and rescheduling, we have not actually had the full dining experience yet. But the food so far has been good. But I've heard great things. So
I encourage you to go back then.
Yes, March 23rd.
Okay.
We'll probably get a book.
Thank you, Mr. Kickline, for your report. Any questions? All right. We'll move on to 3.04 Wildcat Foundation. Mrs. Huff.
The Wildcat Foundation board met last Friday, and of course, celebrating Wildcat Foundation Month was a huge success. They produced one of their largest net gains in the last 10 years, making over $64,000, which is great. We also were very grateful and want to acknowledge a donation from the Faulkner Subaru of Mechanicsburg for the Share the Love event. That was $34,000. And lastly, we are just beginning to look at 35 applications for grant funding from teachers that we'll review and then move forward with, based on the money we have available for 26, 27 schools. Great money and we'll give it away.
There you
Do
go.
what they do.
Exactly. Any questions? All right, thank you. Move on to 3.04, the PSBA legislative report. I have nothing additional to report on. From my perspective, we still continue to watch what's going on as far as the cell phone mandate and whether that is going to be signed by the governor. I keep seeing articles about cursive writing and
That has been
continuing.
passed. That is passed.
April, they're supposed to start introducing cursive into the curriculum, which will be good.
And slanted italics or something.
Slanted.
Italics, yes. I had to look up what slanted italics actually was.
I think I still have slanted. I think I still have some of the paper with the dashed lines that you have to write up to. So if you need some, I think I still have some of those. Move on to finance and facilities. I don't believe we had a finance and facilities committee meeting.
We haven't had a meeting yet, so I have nothing to report.
All right. Thank you. And from a board president's report, I wanted to announce an executive session was held this evening at 6:40 p.m. to discuss personal matters and as far as on another round of board appointments and contacts. The information is there on the different boards and contacts that we have, and I think we have them all now. So we should be fine with that at this point. Moving on to item number 5.01, approval of the track team proposal for MMS. Mr. Franger, would you mind taking that one?
Sure. I asked the board to approve the addition of the middle school track team.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
I just have to say that from what we've seen with the rec program with track, it has a great success. Lots of students coming out for that. Creates a lot of community. Also gets a lot of more kids involved in athletics. So I'm really excited to see what happens.
Thank you. Mrs. Schwartz?
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Item 5.02, approval of the pool management agreement with the Borough of Mechanicsburg. Mr. Franger?
I asked the board to approve the pool management agreement for the 2026 pool season.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6, new business, 6.01, treasurer's report. Mrs. Morgan.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the board to approve the treasurer's report as per the attachments, which include the following. Number 1 is the treasurer's report for February 2026. Number 2 is the board budget report for February 2026. Number 3 is the general fund invoices paid, check number 72835 through 72991 in the amount of $1,646,569.69. Number 4 is the electronic payments in the amount of $4,819,988.40. Number 5 is the general fund invoices payable, check number 72992 through 73009 in the amount of $541,219.80. Number 6 is the capital reserve fund invoices paid, check number 1983 through 1985 in the amount of $37,564.36. And the last is number 7, series of 2024 construction fund invoices paid, check number 243 through 249 in the amount of $337,203.03.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Mr. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. 6.02, accept donation high school track scoring shed. Ms. Morgan.
I'd like to ask the board to accept the donation of the high school track scoring shed from ECI Construction, which has an approximate value of $50,000.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Yeah, this was completely brought on by them. They approached us and said that they appreciated the partnership through a number of projects and they wanted to be able to contribute to this last one.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 6.03, approval of the resolution for the public school facilities improvement grant. Ms. Morgan.
I'd like to ask the board to adopt the resolution for the submission of a public school facility improvement grant.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Can you remind us what that grant is intended for?
Yes, sir. In short, the Public School Facilities Improvement Grant is some funding that was made available as part of the last state budget process. It is a competitive grant process, which is different than, as the board remembers, the old PlanCon where it was guaranteed and viable. But within that competitive grant process, you can apply for certain facilities projects, those exceeding $500,000, and get up to 75% of the project. So that's why we're asking for the 75%. I will say it is competitive, so whether there's a little bit of question of will we or won't we be awarded it, but then also the aspect of 75%. I think just in managing expectations, I'm not sure we would get 75% of the grant project we're submitting. And as a reminder, it is for Northside Elementary's HVAC unit that we would be seeking funding. And so the grant package is ready. Very much appreciate the team working with Dr. Bitts, working with Mr. Hoffman, Mrs. Ely, Mrs. Spire. We are ready to submit this week. So.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Squire?
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. We'll move on to item number 7, new business curriculum. 7.01, approval of curriculum map for business, computer, and information technology. Mrs. Huff.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the curriculum maps for business, computer, and information technology as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Just like to thank the people who developed that for the Hartford.
Thank you. Any other? Mr. Smart?
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 7.02, approval of curriculum maps for family and consumer science. Mrs. Huff.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the curriculum maps for family and computer science as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Any questions or comments?
Just repeating my praise for the people that do this curriculum. It's very thankless work, and we certainly appreciate it.
Duly noted. Great, thank you. Mr. Schreier.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 8, new business. 8.01, approval of the masonry repair for Elmwood Academy. Ms. Morgan.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the masonry repair project at Elmwood Academy as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 8.02, approval of the roof warranty extension for Elmwood Academy. Ms. Morgan.
I would like to ask the board to approve the roof warranty extension at Elmwood Academy as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Ms. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 8.03, approval of the roof replacement at Mechanicsburg Middle School. Ms. Morgan.
I would like to ask the board to approve the roof replacement project at Mechanicsburg Middle School as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Mrs. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Move on to item 9, new business, personnel, item 9.01. Mr. Kickline, would you mind taking that, please?
Sure. I would like the board to approve the personnel report as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments?
Oh my gosh, look who's on the list here.
I'd like to acknowledge that.
Yes.
For, how many years of service, and some I can certainly attest to of thank you for all that you've done for the kids. That's why you're always
Well, that's pretty sad, but happy for you.
Thank you. We've got her for a few months left there. You can see.
Yeah.
I'd also like to just point out Sandy Zettelmiller, his service to this institution. I think he was the athletic trainer when my wife was a student a couple years ago, so it would be sad to see him go. And also Keith as well, Keith Shively. So we wish him the best. See, oops.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Mrs. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. 9.02, approval of the affiliation agreement with Wilson College.
I would like the board to approve, ask the board to approve the affiliation agreement with Wilson College as presented.
We have a second.
Second?
Any questions or comments? Hearing none.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 9.03, approval of the memorandum of understanding with the Wildcat Foundation.
I would like to ask the board to approve the memorandum of understanding with the Wildcat Foundation as presented.
We have a second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Mr. Schwartz.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 10, new business policy 10.01, the second and final reading of revised board policy 105.2, exemption from instruction. Mr. Frangel.
I'd like to ask the board to approve the second and final reading, revised board policy 105.2, exemption from instruction.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Schwer.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Instead of reading it all, I'll just say 10.02, Mr. Frangel.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of revised board policy 137.1, district program participation by home education students. That includes academic, CTC, co-curricular, and extracurricular.
We have a second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Schwer.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. 10.03, Mr. Frangel.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of the revised board policy 218.1 regarding weapons.
We have a second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Item 10.04, second and final, I'm sorry, Mr. Frangel.
I'd ask the board to approve the second and final reading of the revised board policy 346 regarding workers' compensation.
We have a second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Mr. Frangel.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
Thank you. Mr. Frangel, item 10.05.
So I'd like to ask the board to approve Mrs. Morgan Stralow as the school board's representative to the Capital Area Intermediate Unit.
We have a second.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Welcome aboard. It's a great organization. You'll learn a lot, the many different things that they do in the background. Having served there, it was a good experience, and I wish you luck.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Hearing none.
Unless I hear a negative response, I'll record the roll call as a unanimous vote.
We have reached the second opportunity for public comment. This opportunity is reserved for comment on issues not listed on the agenda and not being voted on this evening. As a reminder, public comment is limited to residents and taxpayers of the school district. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and requires community members to observe a reasonable decorum. If you would like to address the board, please share your name and the municipality in which you reside. Seeing none. Ms. Morgan,
I would like ask the board to adjourn.
do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, board adjourned. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.